Welcome to today's math video being brought to you all the way from the shores of Ocho Rios, Jamaica. Make sure we have those notes out and get ready to work some practice problems, and let's go ahead and jump into the math.
Welcome to our first video for lesson 1-6, solving inequalities. We're going to have 4 videos on this particular lesson. In this particular lesson, we are going to be looking at something that's very similar to what we have been doing with solving equations, but instead we're going to just change things up a little bit, and instead of having an equal sign, we're going to be using some different symbols that you're familiar with, like less than, greater than, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. And that's going to change our problems from equations to inequalities. Now, an inequality is very similar to an equation, but instead of using an equal sign, we have those 4 signs that I just mentioned, and an equality symbol. Now, these 2 examples on the right do a great job of illustrating the difference between what happens when we solve an equation and what happens when we solve an inequality. Our process for solving is going to be exactly the same, but the differences are all going to come in when we interpret our solutions. For example, in the equation x plus 2 equals 5, if we were to solve that, we get one single answer, x equals 3. 3 is the only number that we can plug into that and have that statement be true. If we look at the inequality on the right, however, we have the same basic premise. We have x plus 2, but this time instead of having an equal sign, we have a less than or equal to sign, and then our 5. So we would solve this the same way, just like we subtracted 2 from both sides in the equation. We would do the same thing with the inequality. And this time we get an answer of x is less than or equal to 3. Now, we can see here where we're going to get more than one solution. We can plug in any number that's less than 3, and that's going to make our statement true. So instead of just having one answer, we're going to be representing our answers to inequalities on the number line like you see right below the problem. So just to give a point of how we have more than one solution, we can pick any number that's less than 3, which is what this arrow is indicating. So let's say, for example, 2. If I plug in 2 plus 2, that's going to give me 4, which is indeed less than or equal to 5. So any number we plug in this area where we've drawn our line is going to be a possible solution. So we can see how with an equation, we only get one answer that makes it true, but with an inequality, we can have an infinite number of solutions. Now, just a recap of your basic symbols. You should remember these from middle schools, but just in case, we have the less than symbol. And the way I always remember this is it kind of looks like an L. Then we also have the less than or equal to. That's going to be when we can have a number that is less than that, or that is exactly that. We're going to have the greater than symbol and the greater than or equal to symbol. Probably one of the biggest mistakes that people make when we're dealing with inequalities is not remembering these 4 symbols. So make sure that these are something that you commit to memory and that you are referring back to and making sure you have everything in the right direction. Now, there is also one more that we will see sometimes that's an inequality. We won't deal much with them in this problem, but these are going to be a not equal to symbol, and that just means that the 2 things are not equal. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into a little bit more notes. Now, the most important difference, like we said, between an inequality and an equation is that every inequality has an infinite number of solutions, whereas most equations we've dealt with at this point have only one solution. We did have that one special case of infinitely many solutions, but those are going to be the exception rather than the rule. Now, since inequalities have an infinite number of solutions, we typically show solutions to an inequality on a number line like we just showed on that first example. The direction we shade and how we represent the starting value depends on what kind of inequality we are dealing with. Now notice, this table below can only be used if the variable is on the left side of the equation. So the variable has to be over here. Otherwise, if it ends up being something like this, where the variable is on the right, you would have to do the opposite of what's on the table. Alright, so when we are looking at a less than symbol, we are going to draw an open circle over that number, and we're going to shade to the left. When we have a greater than symbol, because we don't have the line underneath again, we can't have equal to that number, we are again going to have an open circle, but this time we're going to shade to the right. And notice that our shading is matching the direction that these arrows are pointing. Now, when we have the equal to symbol underneath, that means that we can actually have that number and it be part of the solution. So when that is the case, we're going to put a closed circle when we have that line underneath it. And then again, we're going to shade in the same direction as its matching piece over here. So if it's a less than or equal to, we're shading left. If it's greater than or equal to, we are shading right. So make sure that you get those copied into your notes, and we'll go ahead and jump in and do an example. So for problem number 1, we're asked to solve and graph the following inequality. We're going to use the same steps that we did when we were solving equations. We're going to be going through our order of operations backwards, just like we have been doing in equations. So if we look at this problem, we have some multiplication going on and some addition going on. The first thing that we will need to undo is that addition, which we will do by subtracting. So we have 2x is less than 4. And then the last step, we have to get rid of that 2 in front of the x, so we'll divide both sides by 2. And we get x is less than 2. It's important when you are giving these to go ahead and give us this as your solution. This is actually your solution. We'll graph it in just a second. A lot of people want to skip to the graph and not include this, but we do want to see this on your mastery checks and your tests. So the last thing to do is to graph this. So we are going to look at the number 2. We are going to put an open circle there because we do not have the line underneath it. And our variable is on the left just like we need it. So we are going to shade in the direction of the arrow to the left. Alright, you guys go ahead and try the U-Try. Check your answers on the solution page, and we'll be back with video 2 in just a moment.